As you achieve some success, the danger of who you choose to trust and the danger of who you let into your inner circle grows exponentially. In fact, the more successful you become, the more you have to guard your attention and the more you have to guard who you give oxygen to. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today in studio, once again, I have Mr. Parker DeKubber from Prime Edge Media. He's here to discuss some pretty important topics that I think you're going to enjoy, especially if you're a young business owner. You probably encountered a lot of these things yourself, and learning the signs to look for that somebody may not exactly have altruistic intentions. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Parker DeKubber number 2. Check it out. And let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. And hey, if you can like and subscribe, that'd be awesome too. It's just 2 mouse clicks. Hey, what's up, Parker? Welcome back.
It's good to be here, man. I'm excited. When was our last one?
It's about a year ago. I think we recorded it in February of last year.
Now our social media system is in full swing, which is really cool. I got some new people. I got my cinematographer sitting right here doing some producing for us, and yeah, I mean, that really, I think the business itself has grown, but our team, ironically, has gotten smaller. But we've gotten a lot more efficient, and I think we have a lot better talent on the team now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we were talking off camera a couple of days ago about some issues that you've worked through over the last year. And the way I'm going to frame this conversation is more about pitfalls that you run into once you start to experience some success.
Oh, okay.
So, because when you're just starting out, you kind of like take help from anybody that offers it, right? Yeah. And most people have altruistic intentions, but you do run into people that are hangers-on or don't always have the best intentions. But as you achieve some success, the danger of who you choose to trust and the danger of who you let into your inner circle grows exponentially. In fact, the more successful you become, the more you have to guard your attention and the more you have to guard who you give oxygen to, quite frankly.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because during that conversation, I had told you that the very first time that you and I had met, came here to the office and, we talked for forever and it was awesome, just like we do on a regular basis now. And you had told me that I need to be careful about who I let into my circle and like who I let have influence over me. I think it was not everybody has the intention that they lean on to. Where people will come into your life and act as a mentor, but really they have the intention to either skew what you're doing, take over what you're doing, or completely change how you're doing things, for whatever reason that may be. And I've experienced quite a bit of that this year. So,
well, they want to latch on.
Yeah.
Because you're a rising star. And every time I see you, you've accomplished more and more. You're climbing the rungs of the ladder one at a time. And a lot of times you're dealing with people that don't have a lot going on. Yeah. And they see somebody that they can latch onto that probably doesn't have the acumen to see their true intentions in real time.
Yeah.
And it's very opportunistic and it's very predatory, quite frankly. And yeah. I hope that you've learned from this most recent experience. Would you care to talk about it?
Absolutely. So I'm going to preface this by saying that, I'm 23 years old. I've been doing this for 6 years, but it feels like I started this yesterday, and for me, I've always and I say always as in my career, I felt like not to be crude, but I don't know shit about fuck, and I felt that way because that's been my entire life. I actually used to be an athlete, and that was I guess the kind of frame that I was coached under is you don't know anything and winning is the expectation and anything but that is complete failure. So for me, when I feel like I don't know everything, then, and I know that I don't know everything. When I start feeling like that, it feels like I don't know anything. And for me, what that kind of created is this assumption that anybody who's older than me, anybody who has more life experience than I do, anybody that seems that they are better at what they do than I am, or has a piece of something that I need that I'm not as good at, I assume that they are, God's gift to the universe and that I need to let them in. I experienced that over the last couple of years with somebody who helped me build the business. He had skills that I did not, and frankly still don't. So he definitely has way better people skills than I do. I'm just like you. I don't like networking. I don't, like to go out and do the thing. I'd rather just sit in my office all day and just work. And, I just kind of assume that because I don't have as much skill in that department, that I don't have it at all, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I more recently took on a business partner. He was a equity partner. He had a very minor stake in the business. He very much impressed me by a lot of the things that he would say while we were on set filming. And that bled over into me assuming, because this guy is middle-aged and very professional in his demeanor. He was very put together. And what I kind of realized later was that was a facade. Which, is kind of interesting to look back on now. But yeah, he just seems so much more like put together than me. So I assumed this guy has so much career experience. He had an MBA, he's got all these degrees, and I just, I don't have formal education in business. I went to school of hard knocks, and so I assumed, this guy must have so many things that I don't, because he had a way of really simplifying down what our problems were and was able to articulate a solution a lot easier than, I could come up with. What I learned from that experience is just because you can't articulate the problem doesn't mean that you don't understand it. And things get, it's just like doing your own marketing. Everyone else sees it completely different and way more simple than you do, but because you see all the appendages, and you see what's all involved, you are too close to it. You're too close to be able to make an informed decision most of the time, or at least that a outsider would.
Let me ask you this. How did that relationship go sideways?
It went sideways because so here, I'll include this too. I had somebody this year, very early this year. Well, I guess last year, because it's February now. But I had somebody explain to me that because the typical father figure, I have a great dad. He's a fucking awesome human and love him to death. But I guess he has no skill set in the arena that I'm trying to do life in, if that makes sense. He owned his own business for a while, but he didn't build the business. So he bought into it, and then later, some things had happened and he had sold it. So I have never been able to get the type of life experience from him that I feel like I need in this stage of my life. And because of that, and combined with the whole feeling like I don't know anything, that created this almost unconscious push for me to always be looking for that mentorship type figure. Mm-hmm. So I've noticed that that's kind of what happened. And I've done this plenty of times, without realizing it until it was too late. I let these people dictate just about everything that I did. Because I assumed that, again, because I feel like I don't know anything, that they must know way better than I do. So I just have to listen to them blindly. And that's kind of what happened, is I started listening to him and he would tell me all the time, I don't have to explain myself to you. I know what I'm doing and I have the stats and whatever the hell to prove it. And what I've realized is if somebody is not willing to remind you simply because you're ignorant, I think that's a huge red flag, because if the more that you have to tell somebody, well, I don't have to prove shit to you, it kind of makes me think that you do. Because if you really had nothing to prove, you wouldn't have to tell me that you had nothing to prove, right?
sharing knowledge is part of the transaction. That's part of what that person brings to the table. Imparting that knowledge into you so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that he did. Even if he's as good as he says he is, and maybe he is, maybe he isn't, I don't know the guy, he still has an obligation to help you understand because you're the next generation. And so you can be much further ahead when you reach his age. That's his function in your life. And that's where he really adds value. In the short term, yeah, he can help you understand some business concepts and avoid some pitfalls and stuff like that. And unfortunately, he turned out to be the pitfall. And but as I think about it, I'm like, why does this individual want to latch on to your company? If he's got all these other things going on, how can he possibly have time other than maybe in an advisory role? But but an advisor must explain, because otherwise he's got to keep doing the thinking for you. That's where he adds value. He teaches you how to think, and then you don't need him anymore, but he gets to keep a piece of the company as just like an ongoing thank you, because he helped you get it to where it wouldn't otherwise be. And then there's value there. And that's a very healthy relationship, but it sounds like it didn't turn out that way.
Well, and that's what he wanted. So to give people at home some context, that was kind of the relationship. He had no stake. He had no capital in the business. He made zero investment. The only investment that he made was his time. And we met for an hour a week, and, he would text back and forth and, that sort of thing. But then I later found out that he's like, I don't ever text with anybody like this, and whatever, which was odd to bring up, but he, that was the relationship. Is he was supposed to be the advisor for the company and help me in the areas that I wasn't strong in. And where this all kind of landed was, well, actually, let me back up. Let me go in chronological order here. Our relationship slowly turned into, because he wouldn't explain anything to me, very much you need to do this because I fucking said so. And any amount of questioning me is insulting. In fact, he literally said that to me one time. The fact that you're asking me this question is fucking insulting to me. That was his exact words.
Well, it's a form of abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's probably some function of narcissism or some other, bad character trait, and you're dealing with people who refuse to explain themselves, or they refuse to give you the time of day when that's their sole function. That's a huge red flag. Hopefully going forward, you'll see that for what it is, because you will encounter that again.
Yeah.
You talk about, growing up without really any model. Like, you didn't have an example of somebody that had accomplished what you were looking to accomplish. But even if you did, even if your father was a successful entrepreneur, he wouldn't have done it in, today's climate. And so, he could probably have helped you avoid some of the pitfalls, but, we're still figuring things out. And at the age of 47, I'm still figuring things out. Yeah. So, everything's constantly changing. And you're right, you can't trust anything that you see, including the mainstream media. Everything that you're presented with is a fabrication or a distortion or something that's designed to create a narrative. Like, there almost is no truth anymore. Yeah. And so, we can go down that rabbit hole, but I'd prefer not to.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep it more about, business and, and you're in a particularly unique situation, both at your age and as far as you've gotten at this point, because you've gotten farther than 95% of people ever will, and you're just getting started. There are people that call themselves, a marketing agency, and they never land a single client, and so
a lot about that in your industry.
Oh yeah, well, there are a lot of parallels between what I do and what you do. Yeah. But I do think that being a young dude, it creates some vulnerabilities that you'll eventually age out of, and the sooner you learn to recognize that. It's kind of like trust but verify. You don't have to go through life being suspicious of everybody who reaches out to you, but you got to understand that the more successful and the more visible you become, the more people are going to come out of the woodwork.
So, and what's interesting is when you and I were talking the other day, you were one of the first people to ever tell me that it's not a bad thing for my self-worth to be directly connected to my business. And, for my entire life, or not my entire life, my entire career, I've been told that that isn't a good thing and that I need to, diversify what I'm doing, because if the business fails, then I'm going to feel like a failure. And I would agree. But I also kind of see that as well, no shit, and good, because I don't want something to fall back on. But anyway, my, entire self-worth has been connected to this business for the last, 5-6 years. And I was told by this person, he didn't think that I could articulate the need for my existence. That's what he said. And he said that you are selling a product with no need. And he didn't say without value, which was interesting. Because he told me, well, I see the value, but I don't think that you can prove that you need to exist, which I thought was interesting. And
it's just more abuse.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't read too much into it. The guy's just a piece of shit.
Yeah. And also, this is kind of interesting for our industry, is I was told that if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. Well, when it comes to creative, that's not true. Neil deGrasse Tyson had this thing on, how, like, for instance, Van Gogh's painting Starry Night, never would have been created if he didn't create it. And I think, like, AI would have never come up with that in a billion years, at least for what it is right now. And truthfully, I don't think it ever could. Even as far advanced as it could get, I don't think that it could do that. And I think that has a lot to do with what we do. Nobody is going to create the exact same type of content that we do. Nobody is going to be able to measure a human's level of perception on a topic. Like, you can't measure trust. You can't, and there are proxies to measure trust, but you can't measure trust alone. Humans don't have a fucking trust thermometer, like, that's not a thing. And that whole statement about if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, is just asinine to me.
Again, I think you're reading too much into the comments of somebody who is being intentionally abusive and dismissive of your value. He was literally trying to take you down a notch. And we talked off camera, and I've said this many times, but it's worth repeating. Insults always come from beneath.
Yeah.
People better than you will never insult you.
Yeah.
Because they want to build you up. So I know when somebody like that, because you put an emotional value on his words, and then he comes back at you with that.
Yeah.
That's trauma. Abusers don't start out, they start off really nice, right, and like everything's great, and they're right, building you up, and then they kind of reel you in, and then they kind of go down this different path, and you start thinking, like, what did I do? What's wrong with me? Well, he's saying I suck. What am I doing that makes him say that? Well, no, he's just an abusive piece of shit.
For anybody out there that is dealing with something like this, that thinks that they can't do it themselves because they feel like they don't know shit. Well, as hard as it is, I think the best way to do that now, knowing what I know now, I think would be to look at it from a place of cold hard facts. What have you done? Whether and like, take your own perception out of it. Whether you think that you've done, good shit or, whatever, because we always discount our success. Look at it from an objective point of view. How many clients have you closed? How many of those people stuck with you? How long did they stick with you? How satisfied were they not from what you think based on your interactions, but what they've actually said to you, and see if that proves that you are who you say you are. And if it doesn't, go fix it. And, obviously go fix it isn't the advice that everybody wants to hear, but because it's so unique to everybody, that I think that's, the best generalized statement I could give on that. But also, like, fuck anybody who makes you feel like you don't know what you're doing. Because even if it's true, it's not fucking useful.
Well, there's a way to give constructive advice without being condescending.
Yeah. Actually, just to pause you for a second, I saw this thing the other day that said, don't accept constructive criticism from someone who's never constructed anything.
Yeah, Mark Cuban has an expression, is never take advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. And I think that's a little bit crude and extreme, but it still illustrates the concept.
Yeah.
But just because somebody hasn't built a business doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about. But the advice should be to try to get you to think a certain way. So, have you thought about it in this way? Have you thought about what happens? You expressed some business goals the other day, and I give you some feedback on that, and we can get into that if you'd like to.
Sure.
But and I kind of told you some of the things that I think you're going to run into, but that was not me discouraging you from trying.
Right.
I'm like, hey, you want to take it and run with it, and maybe you'll be the first to accomplish what you articulated. Personally, I think it's going to be difficult just because of all the things that I outlined before, and I've never seen anybody kind of break past that barrier, and so. I wish you the best of luck, and I'll support you in any way that I can. But I just think you're going to run into some pitfalls. And if you care to articulate that so the audience so I'm not vague booking this. So
let's do it. Yeah. So and the goalpost is planned to move. But what I want is for us to be the undeniably best provider of what we would consider premium social media marketing in West Michigan. And then once we pass West Michigan, I want it to be like the whole state, and then move to the Midwest, then move maybe East Coast, and then whole country, and, from there and on and on and on. And what I want is for us to be so fucking good that when people think premium social media marketing, or cinematic social media marketing, they think of us. And right now, that doesn't exist. And, it's like, and I've been thinking about your perspective on this for a while. And it's interesting to think about, but it doesn't exist. There are some big agencies like the Harmon Brothers and VaynerMedia and, things like that, but they don't just do what we do. For us, we just do social media. That's our entire thing. So what I want is to own that niche. I want it to not make sense for any marketing agency that wants to offer the caliber of work that we do to be able to do that. I want them to think we could, but why don't we just white label? Or why don't we just partner with them? And we've got a few agencies that we already do that with, which is really cool because we don't do for instance, we get asked about ads and web and SEO and all that stuff. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to know how to do that. That's not my thing. I'm here to help people shift a narrative and show what makes their business different from the inside looking out. And I don't like web development. It makes me sleepy thinking about it. But so I would rather partner with the experts in that. And that's what I want to be, is I almost want to be the secret weapon for local agencies and hopefully nationwide agencies in social media. That's who we want to be. And I don't know what will get us there. And frankly, I don't know if we can get there. I don't know if that's even a reasonable goal, but I also don't know a single person that we know, worldwide, that thought that they could, everybody thought that it could happen, I guess. Nobody ever imagined Amazon, but fucking Bezos did. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. And I've also kind of made peace with the fact that even if we don't get there, dying in the process of trying to get there is still more fulfilling than, just accepting that it might not be true.
What would you say it is that you sell? If you had to put it into a very succinct kind of thing. Because I was thinking about this, prior to our interview here. And I was thinking about really what MoxieMen sells and why we've been successful with our approach. And so before I share my thoughts on that, I want to see what it is that you think you sell.
So if I could break it down to one word, it would be credibility. Now, expanding on that, I think we sell know, like, and trust. And more importantly, the perception of businesses. So we basically help take what you are already doing in-house. Like, every business knows that they're the shit, at what they do, especially if you have an established offer. But they don't know, and I say they generally, because a lot do, but most don't know how to properly show that to the world in a way that will make them want to say, you know what, here's my fucking money. Like, let's do this. So I think we sell, I think we sell real perception, or we sell the perception of reality. If I had to break it down that much.
Okay. Yeah. That's all true. Of course, you've put a lot of thought into the credibility thing, but you're not selling them credibility. They already have credibility. Okay. You're basically selling the perception, but even that's not really what you're selling. I'll tell you what MoxieMen sells. So when I articulate, to a potential client, what we're proposing, I word it to the effect that for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, whatever our fees end up being for that particular client, you're getting access to a team. And for a team for a fee that you couldn't even hire a junior associate with in today's marketplace, at least in the US.
Yeah.
And so for less than the cost of one junior associate, you get access to a team of senior level professionals with untold amount of experience, talent, and motivation. And so I don't sell them. I don't tell them, we don't sell an hourly rate. We don't bill hourly, and we don't sell packages. We sell access. And so that's what they're buying. They're buying access to a team that gives a shit about the outcome of their marketing efforts. And so I'd encourage you to kind of like wrap your mind around that, because you told me that your churn rate is less, or your turnaround time is less than a year. And MoxieMen clients stick around for an average of 7 to 8 years. And so it's because once they see it work and they realize they've got this team that they can deploy to all sorts of different tasks, and there's virtually nothing we can't do, relatively speaking, that, they start looking for opportunities to utilize, our talent. And so that's kind of a different sort of offshoot that you don't necessarily need to wrap your mind around. But if your churn rate is high and you're turning clients over in less than a year, chances are they're looking at it like, okay, you tell them it's going to be $2,000 a month and you're going to need 3 to 6 months. So they think to themselves, okay, I'll throw 6 to 12 grand at it and see what the results are, and then I'll make a decision going forward. But if you articulate it as though they're buying, basically they're hiring you, almost like hiring an employee. They're hiring you and you're going to go in perpetuity. I found a lot of success with that approach. But it does take the right type of client in order to gravitate to that type of offer. It doesn't work for everybody.
Okay, so this is really interesting. So first of all, I think part of the reason why our churn is what it is because we are, after almost 2 years of having the system that we have now. We've had versions of it for years, but having what we call the Trust Catalyst social media marketing system as what it is today it's very much in its infancy. And I think we have, and I don't know, my cinematographer might agree with me, is I feel like we've just now, in the last few months, really found who we serve best. Because, so this client that we just brought on, they are a giant company. They have 8 brands under one roof. Like, it's insane to me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. The conversation that we have had from the jump is like, and this has been a value proposition for a long time. We're your social media marketing department. I love that because it's just like what you said. So I find it funny that you say we give you a whole team of experts for the same price or even less than hiring one in-house employee. We used to say that verbatim.
This probably isn't the first time I've said that to you.
No, I don't think so. And that's how we've kind of sold. But we now with this client all day yesterday, we're talking about us being a long-term in-house type partner. And, they were one of the first clients that we've had in a long time that, and we do have a few that just signed with us, that are now starting to think longer term. Because I think the more successful you get, the longer term you can think. Because you're, like Alex Hormozy, who you and I both frequently listen to, says that it's hard to think about the future when rent's due tomorrow. And I think that, like that type of client is really who brands that are focused on brand building and long-term marketing are best for, because we're not focusing on a business that only makes, and I don't want to say only, but, only makes $500,000 a year as opposed to 10, 20, 30 million. I think it's just it's a different client. And I think that those types of folks who are, only around, a quarter to $500,000 or even one, I just don't think that the stuff that we offers them as much upside as a bigger brand might.
Yeah, the challenge is what those companies in that probably 1 to 3 million range and below, they understand they need marketing, they need that credibility, but they also need an immediate return on those marketing dollars. You get companies that hit into that 10, 20, 30 million range like you just described, throwing $3,000 to $5,000 a month at a marketing initiative is not a huge piece of their marketing budget. Right. And so, and if it doesn't work out, well, they just will spend that money next year on something different because the money's coming back. Mm-hmm. And so it's just, they think through it differently, like you just described, because they're not emotionally attached to the outcome and they don't need to send those dollars out to bring more dollars in. They understand that it's a long-term play and that, building a brand takes time and brand recognition in a marketplace takes time. The nice thing about companies like that is you hire them and you do good work for them and you build relationships with the important people within those organizations, and they're going to see you as an indispensable asset because they've been through other agencies that sucked. We talked the other day about how almost all of our clients on our roster came to us off of a bad experience with a local agency. We won't say them out loud. We don't need to throw shitty organizations under the bus. They do a fine job of that themselves. Once you show your value and that you're competent and that you can do the same things you say you do, that you're going to do, and you can articulate their problems to them in ways that they hadn't even thought about it, you instantly earn their trust, and then you reinforce that trust pretty much at every touch point. But relationships are always very fragile. Mm-hmm. I'm like that with like my friendships and stuff too. If I stop providing value to them, they're going to leave because there's no reason for them to be loyal to me. Right. They're not going to be loyal to me just because of something I did 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. You're kind of like, you are who you are right now. And so, so congratulations on landing a client of that size. And, once you've been able to do good work for them, you can springboard that to plenty of other opportunities. It should open a lot of doors.
Yeah, I would agree. And, so we were incredibly fortunate this year. We had, I think it was 4 or 5 of those like big, huge organizations all sign on in the span of, I don't know, maybe like 2 months. It's like, it still is crazy to me. It still is crazy to me. And I don't know what the hell we did to deserve it, but it's cool. And I'm not going to question it. But one of those organizations, when we were onboarding with them, is they actually told me, we're going to go with your smallest package because we don't want to grow too fast. He goes, because if we grow more than, I think he said like 20% this year, we're going to have to hire a whole new sales team. And I don't really want to do that, And because they had grown with their previous agency, who had, by the way, never been to their location ever. They'd been working with them for over a year, I think. Might have been longer than that. And yeah, never stepped foot in their organization. In fact, they were states away. So they had really, you could tell by their marketing, they really had no interest in keeping them as a client. And they still grew, I think he said 10, 20% from the year prior with garbage marketing. And so he was like, well, now that we're doing the good stuff, I don't want it to just explode. But yeah, you're never going to hear that from somebody who's only making, and again, only making, $1 to $5 million a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they're always hung up on ROI because as a business owner, one of the first things you kind of realize is that every dollar out needs to be an investment. So your office space, your employees, they're all expenses, but the more it grows, the more expenses you have, but they're an investment in some capacity or another. And usually they're an investment to buy back your time. And so if you're, in that 1 million range, yeah, you can probably afford to throw $20,000, $30,000, it's only 2 or 3% at a marketing initiative. But if you don't see it work, you're going to start to think, is this the best use of those funds?
Right.
And so, but those people still need help. So it's kind of so I think our job as consultants is to help them understand the importance of this. I think some businesses they invest in things that they shouldn't, at least not yet. You probably shouldn't be investing in branding if there's a better use for those funds.
Right.
And invest in a better sales team. But it's kind of a chicken or the egg argument. Where do you replace yourself? So yeah, every business owner struggles with that, and there's no correct answer.
Yeah. And I do kind of want to talk about that too, there is ROI in what we do. But it's not ROI in a measurable sense. It's so Mike, what would you say that the ROI of the deadbolt on your office door is?
The lock on the door, return on, it's part of the building. Right. You got to have it. It's the security of it. It's really the potential loss if somebody came in here and stole all my fancy cameras.
Exactly. So you don't immediately get an ROI from having it, but by not having it, one, you'd be a hell of a lot more stressed every day leaving this office, I'm sure. And also, you have the potential, a much greater potential, to lose a lot more. So how I like to look at branding really as a whole, and just making sure that your image is what you need it to be in order to be your version of successful, is I think the real value behind that is what happens when you don't have it. And what I'm told a lot is, I hear this all the time, we do this every day, but nobody knows that we do, or our socials just aren't us. I love that phrase. They're just not us. And it's well, what does that mean? It's because you're not showing the personality of the business. And the personality of the business is who your end consumer is connecting with. And, that's what I think is so important. But again, that, the importance of that, what I would call more soft stuff, is not important to a guy who is trying his best to make payroll.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if a guy is struggling to make payroll every week, he understands that he's got to do something, and it's a frustrating set of circumstances, to be, one late payment, from a client or customer, whatever it happens to be, and to be eyeballs deep in debt. Yeah, that's stressful. Yeah, and so I would say that those almost kind of aren't your clients. Yeah. So I've had people reach out. There's one person. She's in our network. I won't mention her by name, but her business was doing about $50,000 a year, and so very small business. And she's in a very saturated industry. And I just said to her, I'm like, first of all, you can't have almost all of your revenue going to a marketing initiative.
No.
You need to be buying inventory and reselling it, even if it takes longer. It was a retail business. I'm sure you remember who I'm talking about. But I just said to her, I'm like, come see me when you're doing, 1 to 1.5. And like her eyes just kind of like narrowed. Like, I'm like, because I was trying to do her a favor. I was trying to help her understand. And I'm like, I'll help you do this on your own. I'll dispense all of the advice. Advice is free.
Yeah.
If somebody has questions, if you have questions, hey, get a hold of me. I'm happy to answer them for you. So, Mike at MoxieMeninc.com. And so, seriously, I'm always happy to help people because people help me. I wouldn't be where I'm at if certain people didn't take a chance on me and make themselves available. And so now I have a moral obligation to pay it forward to anybody that needs it. And so the only string attached is that when that person's successful, that they don't pull the ladder up behind them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that mentality. And, I definitely would say that that's shared. We get a lot of DMs from a lot of small businesses just asking like, dude, because we use our own system, how the hell did you make this happen for yourself? Or how the hell are you actually getting leads on social media? And our lead flow is a result, unfortunately, of the past like 3+ years of doing what we've been doing. It didn't just happen because we turned the system on. It compounds. And that's the other unfortunate part about branding is it doesn't produce money overnight. Same thing with like SEO and stuff. It takes a minute for things to actually start generating. Whereas things more like direct response marketing, like ads and things like that, they can go a lot faster if you do them correctly. And that doesn't really happen with, testing ads and things like that. But,
but now that you've established yourself and your content is everywhere, do you answer those questions in your social media? Well, you totally should if you don't.
Not as much as I would like to. And honestly, our social sucks right now because we're so busy. But I definitely need to. And I used to a lot more than I do now. Because really what I try to answer in my socials is now like, okay, what are the questions that people that I want to buy from me needing to hear the answer to? And and obviously, because that puts food on the table, I would rather do that. But I do need to do that more.
Yeah, there's no shortage of content ideas. It's just a shortage of time and resources.
Right.
Which is true of every business owner. Anybody watching this is going to agree with that.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of ideas. Kind of going back to people and, talk about what you've learned from this whole thing and, how you're going to be more diligent going forward.
That's a good question.
Don't tell me you've learned nothing.
No, I actually, what's been really fucking hard is I have what I feel like I've relearned a lot of stuff. Because if there's, I think it's a adage or whatever the hell you would call it. If you have to learn the same lesson twice, you haven't learned the lesson. Or you didn't learn it the first time.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what's happened here is I knew I needed to be more careful about who I let in my life, as you said, but I wasn't. And, I think I was to a degree, but obviously not as much as I needed to be.
Well, you shouldn't be so hard on yourself. I'll interrupt you to say that, because everything adds perspective. Like you won't make this mistake again.
Yeah.
You won't. And so you made a decision based on the information that was presented to you and you didn't have the perspective to examine it to full capacity. And so now you're and you still don't. You'll still make mistakes. You just make different mistakes the further along you get. I was thinking of I'll get back to your thought in a second, but I was thinking of an analogy. Do you remember the NES game Castlevania?
I know the name, but no.
Okay, it was a side scroller and it had 6 levels and every level got exponentially more difficult. And, it would take a while to beat it. You would go through it several times and you finally beat a level And then you start a new level and everything's completely unfamiliar. There's new enemies. You get new weapons, you get new tools to use, but enemies do more damage. And, it's just like the pitfalls are a little bit farther apart and there's less room for error. And so and the first time you play through that new level, you have no idea what to expect. That's kind of what business is like.
Yeah.
You get to that first level and then you start to enter into the next phase and you start, looking at business partnerships and employees and, clients of magnitude that you've never experienced, and they have a new set of expectations and you got to up your game and you end up just failing in different ways. So, you got many more failures ahead of you, my friend.
Yeah.
maybe that analogy doesn't land. I don't know.
Oh, it absolutely does.
Tell me in the comments. So.
Well, it does for me. And I also like the analogy that running a business is like running a marathon, but not training for it. You're training for the marathon as you're running the marathon.
Yeah.
Like that's what it feels like. But what I was going to say is what I've kind of had to relearn is, or I guess this has just kind of been reaffirmed for me, is nothing is ever as good or as bad as you think it's going to be. And everything that I think I've learned up to this point has kind of reinforced the same lesson of it's gonna fucking work. Like, you don't know how, and you're never gonna know how, but it's gonna work. And that's also kind of why I feel the way that I do about the goal of being, the undeniable social media marketing company and everyone knowing who we are, even though it's never been achieved, at least as far as I know. Because I know that I don't know how it's going to work, but I know that I'm going to do every fucking thing that I can to try and make it work. And I've been shown over the last 6 years, I'm alive still. I'm still running my company. It's not run into the ground, just like I was told it was going to be. And I'm still here, I'm still doing it, and it's still working because I haven't stopped. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a really, really important thing, is like, you can go back down to fucking level 0. You started there. So you can go back there and you can get back to where you are right now because you've done it, and you're going to do it in a quarter of the fucking time.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Yeah. Once you know how to get through the level, you can just breeze right through it.
But I think the biggest thing that I've learned is I don't need to know everything to get to where I want to go, and I can learn along the way. And I don't need other people who have a certain skill set, that might be a little bit better than me. I don't need to bring them in as a partner, to help me get to where I want to be. Because I'd been under that impression that because I don't have the skill, I'm not going to be able to get to where I want to go. Well, yeah, that might be true in the way that you think that you have to get there.
Well, the truth is you do need help.
Yeah.
You can't do this all by yourself.
Right.
So, who knows? Partnerships, people will propose what they want, but you got to remember, what are these people bringing? What are they really bringing to the table aside from their labor?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I'm also I want to make this very clear. I'm not saying that partnership is a bad thing. It's not. But what I'm saying is, and what I think I've learned here is, it's not a necessity. And yes, you need other people because, you can have freedom or control, but you can't have both. And I think that the whole mentality of, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself, breaks at about 100,000 a year, or even less than that, because it's just not possible. But I think that rather than putting all your eggs into one basket with a person, or with some sort of entity that you bring on as a partner, they don't have to be that. You can just pay them for what they're good at, right. So yeah, I think that's been the big lesson. And also that this is another big one. I've learned that I can trust myself whether I'm wrong or not, because I even said this to a few people at the very beginning of the year. What I've decided now is, no matter what, like, I'm going to get as much information as I possibly can from as many reliable sources as I feel like I need to get the best decision for the situation, but once I've made the decision, first, the decision is going to be mine and mine only. It is not going to be anyone else's decision. I'll take your opinion on it, but it's not going to be your decision like it has been for, the last few years. Because it's always been like, oh, well, this person must know more than me. Or this person, I think, knows more than me. So they must have the better answer. So I just have to go with it, even if I don't fully believe in it. Whereas now, it's my fucking decision. And if I make the wrong call, one, I'm going to pivot. And two, I'm going to own it because it was my fucking decision.
Well, you own it already.
Yeah.
So yeah,
right.
You own it. You own it either way. I have a little bit of a different philosophy. I like to put smart people in place and then empower them to make decisions based on their experience and what they're good at. But they're not making, impactful business decisions unless I need them to. But, in terms of like how things are executed, a good example of it, you saw how I interacted with Ali, just showing him the switcher. I just said, use your best judgment.
Yeah.
And that's how I operate. I trust that, he's smart enough to do this, to the best of his ability. And if it's not good, well, then it's on me because I made the decision to, I'm not going to blame him for that. Right. I mean, this is just a podcast. So it's, but if it's like a client relationship or something like that, I give a lot of team members direct access to clients and I'm not even part of the conversation. And that trust is earned over years. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's a situation where I would just there's nothing I can't fix. And I'm not going to put them in a position to make decisions that could be catastrophic. I'm very much involved with that kind of stuff. But, sometimes they make decisions that are different than I would have made. I have to live with that. And so, let's just see what the results are. And I'm like, I've had conversations with teammates where they throw out an idea and I'll say, well, I don't necessarily love that idea, but I don't have a better one. So take it, run with it, do the best you can, and then we'll re-examine it in 6 weeks and see what the results were. And that empowers people. You put that kind of trust in people, they want to do well for you. And so I've had a lot of success with that approach.
Yeah. And I like same page entirely. I'm just not that good at it yet. Perfect example is Ali. He just started to take over our all of our post-production. And I've always been the one to approve everything, before it goes out to a customer because I'm very particular on my standard. But he's been religiously telling me, and we bicker back and forth about this all the time, where he's like, you need to stop thinking like an editor and start thinking like a director. Start thinking from the perspective of the standard that you hold, not the way that it was done. So, for example, there was there's transitions that I really like, and I think they look fucking awesome. He hates it. But both are right, and that's been a really hard thing for me to get a grasp on is as long as it follows the criteria and the client likes it and it does what it's supposed to, it's perfect. Yeah. It's not my perfect, but it's perfect. And I have this admin. She is a fucking weapon when it comes to operations. And she's only 21 years old.
What's her name?
Elena. She is fantastic.
Shout out to Elena.
Absolutely. She does an awesome job. And she unfortunately came from, I think it was 2 other companies where they were very poorly run. And she made next to minimum wage and ran pretty much the entire company. And so fortunately, she has a killer work ethic. And she's very much like me. She cannot accept mediocrity in what she does. And for me, it's been super empowering for both me and for her, for me to be able to say, look, you have these resources, but you know what I want. Just, you understand the job, just make the call, and then if you fuck it up, it's not the end of the world because again, nothing is ever as good or as bad as you think it's going to be. So yeah, you might have fucked up a little bit, whatever. It's not detrimental as long as you've learned from the experience and you know what to do next time. And it took me a long time to really get confident in that mindset, and having what I like to call a send and delete person, which she is. I can just give stuff to her and it just magically disappears. It's fucking awesome. If you don't have one, get one. They're awesome.
Her name's Elena.
Yes. No, don't take that one. But find your own Elena. But yeah, if you have that type of person, it's so freeing to also know that and have the confidence that they know what they're doing, even if they're not going to do it your way.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to say to team members, because I hire people that have experience. And when they come in, they already have an idea of what they're going to be doing and how they're going to go about doing it. So I always tell them all the same thing. I tell them that it's not my job to tell you what to do or even how to do it. It's my job to tell you what the end result needs to be, how it fits into the machine, and make sure that they have all of the resources in order to be successful. And if there's something that they don't have, I need to be made aware of it so I can provide it. And then I tell them to take it and run with it and see what they produce. And when they come back with something, and then we fine tune it, we have a constructive conversation about it, and their output just keeps getting better and better, and they keep getting more and more efficient. That approach has served me well when I get the right person who responds well to that. So,
yeah.
But if you get a new hire or somebody that doesn't really know a lot, you have to do more hand holding. So, your mileage may vary as far as, what worked for me.
Where, I started this when I was 17. If you are in the same boat as me, where you aren't happy with where life is quite headed, but you don't quite know what you want to do, and you get into entrepreneurship and you finally started doing the thing, listen to other people, make sure that the decisions that you make are yours. And obviously don't make stupid decisions. Don't just be like, oh, well, I don't know, but I'm not going to ask anybody. Don't do that. But make sure that your decisions are your decisions, not somebody else's. And even if it takes you longer to get to where you want to go, you can sleep well at night knowing that, you know what, I might not be where I want to be, but damn it, this is going to get me there. And even if it doesn't, you were the one who was in control the entire time, and you have no one else to blame, which is not to discourage you, but to inspire you and know that you have control over where you're headed at every single step of the way. And it's fucking awesome. It's scary, but it's awesome.
On that note, Parker DeKubber, thanks for coming. Glad to have you here.
For sure. We got to do this again.
Oh, anytime. Hey, thanks so much for checking out my video. I really appreciate it. Hey, can you do me a favor and take a second and just leave a comment and let me know what you thought of today's episode. And if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on a future video, or if there's a guest that you think I should maybe try to interview, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much. And hey, as a token of my appreciation, enjoy these outtakes from today's episode. And that's not to say that you need to be suspicious of every person that you encounter, but every single person that you encounter isn't always going to have the same intentions. Well, what the fuck, man? You're actually on time.
I know. And Ali is always on time, and he's not on time.
Imagine that. I guess I was wrong. It's 2:03.